I'm Jesse. I'm a filmmaker and a game designer and a researcher, and I am the current lead designer and puppet master for an alternate reality game we run inside the School of Cinematic Arts. And it's a game that has taught us some really surprising things recently that I'm excited to talk about today. So, Reality Ends Here is the name of the game. It takes a while to explain, so I'm just going to try to do the high level so we can get to the thing that I'm talking about for the very first time today. This is a pervasive game. It lives in a secret underground layer of the school. It is about to begin its 7th consecutive season, which might make it the longest running ARG in history. And it is powered by the astonishing creative works made by the players itself. In truth, the game was created to fix a culture problem we had inside the school and to ensure a future for our students and our legacy. The students were increasingly siloed inside of their majors, and so the writers weren't talking to the production students, weren't talking to the animation, weren't talking to the game designers. They came to school to do one thing and they continued to do it, and they were increasingly of the mindset that all they had to do was show up, go to class, and then at the end of 4 years, a shiny black limousine was going to roll up and someone was going to say, "Come with me, kid, I'll take you to Hollywood." And then they were pissed off when it didn't happen. So what we decided to do is that we had to intervene early when they first got here and do something that didn't seem like we were just going to like wag our fingers at them, that would foster some collaboration, that would break down those silos, like build a community that mattered, and do what I call build a habit of creating, which is to get them to stop being so precious about their work and thinking that they just had to make one good thing for 4 years, and that when that came out and went to a festival, all of a sudden they'd be signed and everything would be great. And do a thing that we sort of also like to call like self-directed learning, take charge of their education and go forward in a new way. So how it works is when you discover the game, and it is hidden, it is secret, it is sometimes gated behind puzzles or myth, you get cards. Cards are the currency of the game. They are also the major mechanic. At this point, they are highly collectible. Some of them are very rare. There are about 650 in the set this year. And they come in different flavors and rarities, but when they're assembled, and you only get about 10 in a pack at a time, they suggest a project, a song, a film, a board game, a radio drama, a mashup, a meme, anything really, or the ingredients that go inside of those things, like in 3D or involving the LA Harbor, or even things like subverting heteronormativity or that passes the Bechdel test. If the project gets made, everybody who contributed cards and also probably like skills and talents to the project gets points. And good things tend to happen to people who play the game and score points. This is an example from last year. This group eventually like swelled to include 20 or 30 different people. It included all 6 of the major silos inside of the school. It started as they wanted to make a web series. And they realized that that was a giant undertaking. So they put together a project that was just the series Bible. And then they put together another project that was just writing the pilot. And another project that was doing the concept art. And another project that was sort of like fleshing all of this out. And they built this thing that couldn't exist probably inside the major system that was like ethnically diverse. It was driven by this LGBTQ like characters and story. And on top of all that, they grafted all of that into a room escape experience that they operated clandestinely inside one of their dorm rooms for an entire weekend. So they would just gently like usher people into this extremely story-rich world where there were puzzles and things. And since their world was set inside a college, it was actually like the dorm room was basically pre-dressed more or less. You went through stuff, you solved puzzles. There was circuit bending, Arduino stuff involved. They taught themselves. They got certified to use a laser cutter so that they could build some of those puzzles. And it was all self-directed. All we did was give them cards, more or less. I was as surprised as anybody to walk into that dorm room. What we've learned is that Reality 10 has changed. Like, we changed some sort of core things about it. 3 years ago, we made some really major changes to the game and its reward structure, and also to some of its mechanics and its thematics. And something really surprising happened. Starting in 2014, the top players in the game have consistently been women, minorities, openly LGBTQ, or ace or non-binary students. This is in stark contrast to the entertainment industry, where they are like heavily marginalized groups that have a very difficult time getting any kind of traction. The 2014, 15, and 16 champions were also all women, which is, again, not the way that it works on the outside. When we started asking questions about this, the players said that the game became like the primary like organizing and motivating force for them. They were feeling increasingly despondent. Two of them, in fact, were like borderline suicidal at one point. And this game, they cite the game as a thing that turned them around and made them understand that they actually did have like an alternative and a way to not consider themselves to be outliers and change the rules of the game and do what they wanted to do. So why do they do this crazy stuff? At the beginning, when this was just a research project, we were able to rely on the Dean's Rolodex. The USC's film school has a lot of famous alumni that we often can call for favors if the dean is willing to use her Rolodex. So we were able to make like a meeting happen with the head of Fox as a reward, or a meal with Robert Zemeckis, or going bowling with the producer of Mad Men. And we still do these kinds of like large, like high-profile serendipitous encounters. But we've scaled that back for some practical reasons. Nobody expected this thing to run for 7 years, and they are starting to get a little tired of my phone calls every summer. But also, the players have responded to some things that we called renewable rewards, which often tended to be access to the kinds of just like low-end DIY gadgetry, like teaching them how to use a 3D printer, or giving them access to a pixel stick, or teaching them like how to program an Arduino. Or even just like, I had a Super 8 camera restored and I hid it somewhere, and we gave out clues to people who had been doing really well in the game with some film that had been in a professor's garage since Return of the Jedi was released in theaters. And they shot it and we got an image back. It was pretty exciting. But they like all of these sorts of things, they're minor. For the most part, like what they really have discovered, that the major reward for them has turned out to be participating in the experience itself, that this game has created a permission structure, they say, to not only like to do the work that they want to do, but also to succeed in it. And other things that they've said are that they feel like the traditional barriers that they perceived in the rest of the industry don't exist inside this game. It made me feel like I mattered and I could do anything. And yet, yes, like the biggest reward was the work itself. And so this got us thinking, because you can say these things about a lot of things. And if only there was a game that could do more of that. Because what if this game wasn't just about making media? Could we take some of the lessons that we've been learning and why this thing is so successful and why it has been turning things around so dramatically and apply it to something else? So here's some data. According to the Pew Research Center, millennials now make up 31% of the electorate. Only 1 in 5 of them voted in the 2014 midterms. There is some fake news floating around and a lot of unverified sort of data about turnout, so I'm not going to talk about 2016 turnout, but midterm turnout in particular is shockingly lower. And for 31% of the electorate, it's kind of tiny and hard to see here, but they make up a disproportionate number of the people who are actually voting. So this is the new project. We are taking what we've learned from reality and sort of tackling a larger culture problem in a broader base. We are not the first to try this, and we don't pretend to be smarter, but reality taught us a couple of lessons that we haven't seen applied to this hard problem, and so I'm going to spell some of those out right now, and what we think we're going to do about it, because the traditional solutions don't seem to be working, and that tends to be because they're sort of focused on like rock the vote sort of things, like just get out on actual election day and voting, but not some of the underlying problems. So reality works because of the cards. The cards are useful for brainstorming and an ideation tool because each one is a connectable, tiny little element, but it is not the entire project itself. So it empowers the player to set their own ambition and difficulty level, but it tends to incentivize themselves to push themselves because they want to score a lot of points and do something large. This is tiny, by the way. Something like the escape room would fill like this, like if they laid out all the cards, it would fill the floor right here. Too many games about engagement or being a person tend to come with like locked missions that are very specific in the ways that you are supposed to interact with them. Do this thing, go to a town hall and raise these sorts of issues, or like start a neighborhood watch, but it's very narrow, and the likelihood that it's going to gel perfectly with what somebody wants or feels like they're capable of doing as like a locked unit tends to be really small. So if we gave them a mission to make like a science fiction film on an iPhone using only in-camera special effects, we probably wouldn't get a lot of engagement from those players because it's very specific and it's kind of like we're giving them homework. But when we give them the cards, I actually got something almost exactly like that because they were excited about it and it was sort of their idea. So ideation and ownership of that idea and making it open to interpretation, because these cards are very vague, like they can be used in a lot of different ways. Like we initially had the card like involving an ace because there was a former player named Ace who just wanted his rookie card to have his name on it. But it ended up being used both for like fighter aces and to talk about people who identify as asexual. We also learned to build community and start local. From its inception, Reality has always had a dedicated social space. It is a secret clubhouse that is hidden inside of the school. It is a place where they go and they congregate and they share and strategize, and they also give each other a lot of ups about some of the incredible things that they're doing with each other. So there is a very personal human connection that drives this engine, and I don't think something that is purely online or has a more faceless sort of effort would be as effective. The game has gotten bigger every year, but it takes root because of these real-world hubs and meetings. And we've added more of those as the years have gone on, inspired in part by meetups like with Niantic's Ingress, where players started meeting together and building cells and coordinating and developing actual personal connections that gave that game a lot more root inside of its player base. So we've added more ad hoc and pop-up physical meetings to build that face-to-face interaction. The lesson I feel of this decade in games is that it's all about communities of players. In-person interactions in our game inherently feel good and tend to result in increased motivation. So that's one thing that we are sort of taking for sure as we move forward, is that there has to be this community in-person sort of aspect that drives this rather than external rewards, which are fleeting and sometimes difficult to wrangle. We've also learned to focus on process, not result. We rarely dictate to our players what we want to happen in the game. Once it's running, my job is to keep it on track, to keep it fun, and to keep it safe, and then to provide tools and opportunities so that they can be their own storytellers and chart their own progress in the game. I think that, this is opinion, activist games are often very explicit in terms of what they want their end result to be, and my experience with this generation, having sort of been very deeply embedded with them and up late with them and that's the course of puppeting this game, is that they're very savvy and they're extremely distrustful of establishments or agendas of any kind. But what they tend to produce on their own is extremely genuine. So for this project, our only goal is increasing engagement. Experience suggests that given the tools and the opportunities, they will actually do us proud. I mean, we didn't tell them what we wanted. We gave them a pixel stick, which is a device that produces cool holograms when it's photographed at a low frame rate. They started with special effects. They built some light graffiti that they ran around with the school. They came up with this organically as the thing that they wanted to do to send a message, because if you have not been to our campus, it's pretty rich and non-engaged for the most part in those sorts of issues. So they felt like doing an art project like this about how vacant things were and how political messages could only be seen if you were like seeing them hidden was a thing that they just built on their own, became one of the inspirations for the project. So this is very new. We only just received a small internal university grant 2 months ago. When I proposed this talk, it was entirely theoretical, but I'm pleased to announce actually today that it is real. It is going forward in some way. It's not going to be exactly this. We're still sort of at the prototype phase, but we are focusing on building the game to live on platforms where the players that we want to reach already exist, and then giving it cool upgrades. For example, we've been using Snapchat spectacles a lot in the last 2 prototype tests for everything from citizen journalism to sharing good deeds that a team has undertaken to being actually one of the main sort of news sources for the game itself. Like there's a dedicated channel that they watch, and because it's so fast and it's so easy and it's so personal because of the spectacles to just share stuff and keep going, it's been fast and organic, and it's already a thing that they really like. So we're deploying the first prototype inside Reality to allow it to spread as far as we can beyond campus in the fall. In the spring, we're going to refine it based on some results, look for some partners, and sort of assess our expansion options. And then next summer and fall, the plan is to deploy something larger ahead of the midterms. So I hope to actually be standing here next year and sharing mostly good news, although I'm sure that at least one of the things I've said, I will stand up here next year and say, that was stupid. So thanks very much. I almost made 15 minutes. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. And yeah, you'll find me after these are done out in the hall.